You said sorry once and it felt like the ground dropped out beneath you. Not because you weren't wrong, because admitting it meant something worse than being wrong. Watch someone who never concedes an argument. Really watch them. They don't look confident. They look cornered. Every counterpoint lands like a threat, not information. Their jaw tightens before their mouth opens. The explanation arrives faster than the thought behind it. They're not defending a position. They're defending something older. Most people assume it's just arrogance, ego on a bad day. But arrogance is usually louder, easier, almost comfortable in itself. This is different. It's tighter, more desperate, more exhausting to maintain. The person who can never be wrong often knows, somewhere, that they are. That's the part nobody talks about. They feel it, the shift, the moment the logic stops working. But they keep going anyway, because stopping feels like collapse. Not just losing an argument, losing something about who they are. That's where the real pattern lives, not in stubbornness, but in structure. Being right for some people is load-bearing. It holds up a version of themselves they cannot afford to lose. So think about where this starts, not in adulthood, not in boardrooms. Think about a kid who only got approval when they got things right, or one who learned that mistakes meant punishment, not correction, or one who was embarrassed publicly, loudly, by someone who should have been safe. You learn early what being wrong costs in your specific environment. And if it costs enough, you build a system to prevent it. The system looks like confidence from the outside. From the inside, it feels like vigilance, constant, low grade, never fully off. Every conversation becomes a small security check. Am I exposed? Did I say something they can use against me? Can I walk this back without them knowing I shifted? That's the loop. Not arrogance, not stupidity, but a learned kind of armor. And armor doesn't ask whether the threat is still real. It just stays on. You'll notice it in small moments, not just big arguments. Someone corrects a minor fact in a group conversation. They didn't attack. They just added context, casually, without looking up. But watch the person who can't be wrong. The face changes, just slightly, the jaw or the eyes. They rephrase what they said as if they had meant the corrected version all along. Right, yeah, that's what I was saying. Technically different. Delivered without pause, gone before anyone can mark it. It happens in 2 seconds and they've already moved on. That small move costs more than it looks like it costs. Because they had to notice they were wrong, decide not to say it, and pivot. All without flinching. That takes practice. That means it's not new. The thing is, they're often intelligent people, sometimes the sharpest in the room, which makes it more confusing to watch and lonelier to be around. Because intelligence without accountability becomes a kind of weapon. It finds the exit in every argument before the argument can land. Reframes, redirects, introduces a technicality, questions your source. Suddenly you're defending how you said it instead of what you said. And they're already 3 moves ahead, safe again, back on solid ground. This is not debating. This is defense architecture. There's a difference between someone who argues well and someone who cannot stop. One can lose and walk away intact. The other cannot afford to find out. The cost shows up quietly at first. A friend who stops bringing things up. A partner who learns which topics to avoid before dinner. A colleague who CCs everyone now, just to have a record. Nobody announces they're doing it. They just adjust. They start managing the person instead of talking to them. That's one of the quieter costs. Not conflict, but distance disguised as peace. The people around them get careful, measured, a little bit smaller. And the person who can't be wrong often doesn't notice. Or they notice and interpret it as respect, as people deferring to them, which only confirms the system. Being right keeps you safe, keeps you central. But inside the same person, something else is also happening. There's a specific kind of fatigue that comes from never being wrong. Because you have to track everything you've ever said. You have to remember the version, protect the version, maintain the version. You cannot relax into a conversation. You have to manage it. And when someone genuinely catches something, the body knows before the mind admits it. The stomach drops a little, the chest tightens slightly. Then the system kicks in. Smooth, fast, practiced. And afterward, they're fine. Conversation over, position held. But something in them is more tired than they were an hour ago. Some people live like this for years without naming it. They think it's just how arguments work, how people are. They think everyone else is that defensive. They just hide it less. This is the self-deception at the center of the whole pattern. That being wrong is genuinely dangerous, not just uncomfortable. Because that belief was formed when it was true in a smaller, more vulnerable version of them. The child who got that feedback eventually became someone for whom it simply never stopped being true. Even in safe rooms, even with people who would not actually punish them. The threat detector doesn't check whether the room is safe. It just fires, and the armor goes on. And the pivot happens. And they move on, and they're fine, and no one says anything. Until one day someone does say something, directly, calmly, without an exit. And it goes one of two ways. Either the whole structure cracks slightly, and something real happens. Or it doubles down harder than anyone expected, and the relationship pays for it. The doubling down is worth understanding, because it looks like cruelty from the outside. It looks like they're choosing the argument over the person in front of them. And in a narrow sense they are, but not because they don't care. Because in that moment, the person in front of them has become the threat. Not the argument, not the fact, the person. And when someone feels threatened at the identity level, logic stops working. You cannot reason someone out of a position they didn't reason themselves into. You can only watch them protect something they don't have words for yet. That's the hardest part to sit with if you love one of these people. They're not lying exactly, they're surviving the only way the system knows how. But survival strategies don't ask whether you still need them. They just run, automatic, below the level of conscious choice. Which means the person caught in this loop is also a prisoner of it. They don't get to be wrong and fine, they don't get that option yet. Every admission feels like the whole floor giving way beneath them. So they never find out that the floor would actually hold. That's the real cost. Not just the arguments they've won by not conceding. It's everything they never learned, because they couldn't afford to be wrong. The feedback that didn't land, the correction that got deflected, the relationship that quietly ended because someone got tired of managing around them, the version of themselves that never got to grow past the armor. Because growth requires being wrong, sitting with it, absorbing it without catastrophe. And if that's never available, you stay the shape the armor made you. Sharp in some ways, defended in ways you don't fully see. Respected maybe, but rarely fully known by anyone, including yourself. If any of this is landing somewhere specific in you, not as observation but as recognition, the first move isn't an apology, isn't a confrontation, isn't a grand admission. It's smaller than that. It's noticing the pivot the next time it happens, just noticing it before you move on. Not stopping it necessarily, just catching it. Seeing the moment where you knew and then didn't say you knew. That gap between knowing and saying is where the whole pattern lives. And just seeing it clearly, without immediately defending against seeing it, is something. It won't fix a decade of armor in an afternoon, but it interrupts the automatic, just slightly, just enough to matter over time. This video is meant for reflection and honest self-examination, not as a substitute for professional support. If this pattern is affecting your relationships or your sense of self in serious ways, talking to someone trained for that is worth considering. What's worth sitting with, quietly, is this one question. What would actually happen if you said, just once, to someone safe, "I got that wrong"? Not as weakness, not as collapse, just as the truth, offered without armor, to see what the room does. Because the room might surprise you, and you might find out the floor was always going to hold.